California. Most people think of Hollywood, Silicon Valley, redwood forests and Pacific sunsets, and the most expensive real estate in the country. They think they know what California is. They don't. 27 miles west of San Francisco, close enough to see from shore on a clear day, there is a place the government prefers you forget. A cluster of rocks that has been the site of mass slaughter, armed warfare, nuclear contamination, and something the EPA has never resolved and may never be able to. It sits in plain sight, and almost no one is talking about it. This is dark geography, the Farallon Islands. Not a beach destination, not a scenic overlook, not the California on the postcards. A group of jagged volcanic outcrops rising from the Pacific Ocean 27 miles west of the Golden Gate. Technically, they are part of the city and county of San Francisco, San Francisco's most distant territory and its most dangerous. The islands have been called many things. The Spanish called them Los Farallones, sea pillars, rock towers rising from nothing. Mariners, the ones who survived the approach, called them the Devil's Teeth, a reference to the submerged rocks and deadly shoals that have pulled more than 400 ships to the ocean floor over 4 centuries. 400 shipwrecks in one small stretch of Pacific coastline. The Native Americans of the San Francisco Bay Area had their own name. They called them the Islands of the Dead. They believed the Farallons to be the dwelling place of spirits, the home of those who had passed on. And notably, remarkably, there is no archaeological or anthropological evidence of a single visit to those islands. Not one footprint, not one artifact. The people who knew these waters best looked at those rocks and made a decision. Those islands are not for us. They were right. The first European to leave a documented record of setting foot on the Farallons was not an explorer. On July 24, 1579, the English privateer Sir Francis Drake landed on the islands. He wasn't there for science. He was there to take seal meat, bird eggs, provisions. He named them the Islands of St. James, claimed them without ceremony, and left. The Spanish came after, then the Russians. Beginning in 1812, Russian hunters established a permanent sealing station on South Farallon Island. They brought workers from the Aleutian Islands, men trained in open water hunting, and they went to work. Fur seals, sea lions, elephant seals killed for their blubber, rendered into oil, shipped north. Approximately 200 to 1,500 animals killed annually, year after year for nearly 3 decades. By 1820, the northern fur seal was functionally extinct on the Farallon Islands, a population that had taken centuries to establish, gone in less than a decade. The Russians left in 1840. There was nothing left to take. They also left behind something they hadn't planned on: rabbits. A few animals brought as a food source, abandoned when the hunters departed. They multiplied. They consumed every plant on the island. Then they ate dead fish, seaweed, according to a 1960 newspaper account, each other. The meanest, ugliest rabbits in the world, the article read. The island has a way of doing that to things. In 1848, Mexico ceded California to the United States. The gold rush began almost immediately. Within months, San Francisco had exploded from a small coastal outpost into a city of tens of thousands. The farms hadn't caught up. The supply routes hadn't caught up. People were hungry, genuinely, urgently hungry, in the middle of a gold boom. A pharmacist named Doc Robinson sailed to the Farallon Islands with his brother-in-law and a boat. What he found were mer birds, millions of them, nesting on the rocks in dense, open colonies. And their eggs, large, protein-rich, blue-green, and mottled, in staggering numbers. Robinson's first trip netted $3,000. In 1849, money, roughly $122,000 today. He was not the last person to make that calculation. Within years, the Farallon Islands had become a commercial operation unlike anything the California coast had seen. At peak production, 500,000 eggs per month were shipped from those rocks to San Francisco markets. Multiple companies, multiple armed crews, all working the same small cluster of islands. They did not cooperate. Territory was claimed. Arguments escalated. Guns were drawn. The Egg Wars, that is the name they were actually given, went on for decades. Firearms were used. Cannons were used. Several egg collectors were shot and killed in open territorial disputes over nesting grounds. The lighthouse keepers stationed on the South Farallon, men whose only function was to keep a light burning so ships didn't wreck on the Devil's Teeth, were assaulted by poachers. Over 4 decades, approximately 14 million murre eggs were taken from the Farallon Islands. 14 million. The wars ended around the turn of the century, not because anyone intervened, but because commercial egg farming in Petaluma made the islands economically unnecessary. The murre population never recovered. Today, more than a century and a half later, murre colonies on the Farallons remain at roughly 1/4 of their pre-gold rush size. The island absorbs what is done to it. It doesn't forget. We're halfway through, and we haven't reached the part the government spent decades trying to keep quiet. If this is your first time here, subscribe. What comes next is exactly why this channel exists. In 1946, the United States detonated 2 atomic bombs at Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Operation Crossroads. Several dozen ships were anchored nearby as deliberate test subjects. The goal was to measure what nuclear weapons did to a naval fleet. One of those ships was the USS Independence, a light aircraft carrier built in 1942, combat tested in the Pacific, decommissioned and sent to Bikini to absorb the blast. It absorbed the blast. It survived structurally, but it was saturated with radioactive contamination the Navy did not know how to fully remediate. For 5 years, it was studied, scrubbed, studied again. In 1951, the Navy towed the USS Independence to a position south of the Farallon Islands and sank it with torpedoes. That was one ship. Between 1946 and 1970, the waters surrounding the Farallon Islands were used as the primary nuclear waste disposal site for United States government laboratories, including Lawrence Livermore, one of the country's leading nuclear weapons research facilities. Low-level radioactive material, scrap from nuclear testing, contaminated equipment, at least 47,500 barrels. 47,500 barrels of radioactive waste dropped into a 540 square mile area of ocean just south of the Devil's Teeth, just south of the Islands of the Dead. Science writes it down. Science just doesn't always publish what it finds. By 1990, investigators reported that many of the barrels had broken open. An unknown number could not be located at all. What had entered the water, what it had done to the ecosystem, what it continues to do, the complete picture remains classified or unresolved, or both. In 1982, California Governor Jerry Brown wrote a formal statement to the House Subcommittee on Oceanography. In it, he wrote, "In California, we have learned from our experience with the Farallon Islands nuclear dump site that remedial action is virtually impossible when unforeseen problems arise. The specter of leaking barrels of plutonium now lurks on the ocean bottom less than 50 miles from the Golden Gate. Leaking barrels of plutonium less than 50 miles from one of the most densely populated cities on the West Coast. The nuclear dumping was banned in 1970. The barrels were already there. They still are. No one has successfully cleaned them up. No credible remediation plan has ever been implemented. The official position, essentially, is that disturbing the barrels could cause more damage than leaving them undisturbed. And so they remain on the ocean floor, inside what is now, by federal designation, a national marine sanctuary. Some anniversaries don't need a calendar. Every October, something predictable happens at the Farallon Islands. The great white sharks arrive. The Farallons host one of the highest documented concentrations of great white sharks in the world. They come for the seals, elephant seals, harbor seals, sea lions that have slowly returned since the hunting stopped. The sharks have always known where the prey gathers. Researchers have tracked individual animals returning to the Farallons year after year. One female, nicknamed Deep Blue, is estimated at over 20 feet in length and maybe more than 50 years old. She was here before most of the people who will watch this video were born. She will be here after. The islands are closed to the public completely. The only people permitted to land are researchers from Point Blue Conservation Science and staff from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There is a small residence on the southeast Farallon Island. Scientists live there seasonally. They study the seabirds, the marine mammals, the sharks. Whether any of them study the barrels on the ocean floor, that information is not widely published. California has 39 million residents. It sees roughly 250 million tourists every year. They come for the coastline and the wine country and the national parks. Almost none of them know that 27 miles west of the Golden Gate, there is a cluster of rocks that has hosted commercial extinction events. Armed warfare with guns and cannons over bird eggs, the deliberate sinking of a nuclear-contaminated aircraft carrier, 47,000 barrels of radioactive waste on the ocean floor, and one of the densest populations of great white sharks on the planet. Not the California on the postcards, not the California in the travel guides. The version that was here before the tourists. The version that will be here long after. The island has decided something about human presence. I don't think it wants company. Subscribe if you want more of this. Next time we're leaving California entirely. Where should we go? Leave it in the comments. We're always listening.